In today's Gospel, our Lord is admonishing us to be vigilant, that is, to be always aware of our eternal destiny. And indeed, we celebrate today the life of a saint who was not always aware of his eternal destiny, and he was not for a good portion of his life vigilant. And so we reflect in the life of St. Augustine upon the mercy of God, and most especially what it means when a man becomes vigilant. For St. Augustine lived as a pagan. Indeed, he had a concubine in which he fathered a child outside of wedlock, and he gave no thought. And he tells us of himself that he really gave no thought of death, no thought of God. And to give thought, especially of death, is one of the primary ways that we are to remain vigilant. Indeed, our Lord instructs us in today's Gospel that we do not know the day nor the hour in which the Lord may come. But He comes, and He comes to judge. What St. Augustine finally came to realize when he came to his senses, most particularly through the prayers of his mother, is that the Lord, when He comes, He wishes to pronounce a favorable judgment on us. He does not wish to condemn us. And so St. Augustine would say of himself, contrary to what many of the modernist interpretations of his life say, for they say that St. Augustine was faithful to the one woman whom he lived with out of wedlock. He did not take upon himself any other women to live with, and yet this is contrary to the very eyewitness of the saint himself, for he declares of himself, "Late have I loved you, Lord," and in that declaration he declares that his eternal salvation was in peril for all the time that he delayed loving the Lord. And so, contrary to what many will tell us St. Augustine meant, we do not have to listen to them, for the great saint has left us in his Confessions an account of his whole life. And so he came to realize that love of God was the primary purpose. We have been put on this earth, and when the Lord comes to judge, He wishes to find us faithful servants. And so we have to be on guard, as St. Augustine would become on guard, that there is a thief who wishes to come in and steal most particularly our souls, to take possession, as it were, of our souls, not necessarily in a strict sense, but certainly to take possession by us by trying to lure us into mortal sin. And so St. Augustine would come to his knees, confess his sins, and then he would be entrusted with much by the Lord, for he would become one of the great bishops and one of the great intellectuals in the life of the Church. And most particularly, he is noted as the father of true philosophy, because he lays out very clearly that the philosophy of the Holy Roman Church is the philosophy of Christ. That is, if we are to truly be lovers of wisdom, then we must be lovers of Christ. And so, let us remain vigilant, and let us, as it were, declare with St. Augustine that we too have been late in our love for the Lord, delaying by our faults and failings in our own sins that complete generosity, that complete donation of ourselves to God. And if we are willing to do this, then God will certainly give us that most favorable of all judgments, in which St. Augustine knew that our hearts are restless until they rest in God. And so now St. Augustine has attained his rest, and he intercedes for all of us that we too may attain the same rest that he now enjoys for all eternity in heaven. And so let us declare with the great saint that we have been late in our love, but yet we know that our hearts are restless until they will rest in God. And so let us remain vigilant, most especially by reflecting upon those four last things: death, judgment, heaven, and hell, but most particularly that the Master comes not wanting to pass an unfavorable judgment upon us, but that He truly wants to declare to us, after a life of vigilance, "Come, blessed of my Father, come into the kingdom that has been prepared for you from the foundations of the world." And so we have that hope that God truly awaits us with open arms to join the company of the saints, praising Him together for all eternity. And so let us not be fooled by the false philosophy of our day, our death-defying culture, and in the very fact that it is a death-defying culture. It proves itself a culture that does not think about death because it truly believes it has the power to overcome death. And we know full well that there are no technological advances, there are no advances of medicine, nor any advance in human science that will put off that fateful day that all human beings must experience, that day when they will pass from this life into life eternal or into death eternal, that is, into the abode of God Himself or into the abode of the devil and all his minions, where our Lord tells us at the end of today's Gospel, there is nothing but the wailing and the grinding of teeth. And so, let us strive to seek to join the angelic choirs, so that rather than experience the grinding and the wailing of teeth, we will sing with the angels the love of God with all the saints, fulfilling the angelic choir and praising the good God who comes in this life in order to show us His mercy as He showed it to St. Augustine, and He wishes to use all of us to bring His mercy to all the souls in the world. And so, let us imitate the great bishop who would strive earnestly from the moment of his conversion to truly show the Lord His sorrow for delaying His love, and then by a life of vigilance show the Lord just how much He loved him, so much so that he could be entrusted to become a shepherd of the flock. And so we see that the worst of sins cannot, as it were, be undone by the mercy of God. And if we truly show ourselves repentant, the Lord will entrust us with much, as He has entrusted every member of the mystical body to strive earnestly for our own salvation, and in doing so, we necessarily contribute in the salvation of others, as the good bishop and all the saints have done, and so let us seek always to join them.
Fructum ventris tuum,